Howdy, of you delicious people. I'm here today to review a movie called Separation. So, right now, currently at the second of this recording, this movie is on a Premiere Access thing right now, where you can go into YouTube and Premiere access this, I guess. And it's on like $20, I think, in Amazon. Here's the thing, though. More than likely, I've been consistently using apps like letter C Movies, so C Movies, or I've been using an app called Fox HD Movies. And more than likely, this will have this movie here, but it's kind of in like the theater stage of it. Eventually, when I'm assuming we're gonna have much more like premieres and stuff like that for this movie, eventually you'll probably get to go to either one of those apps, and eventually the premiere thing will be there, so you can probably watch this movie there for free. So there's a suggestion there, but if you want to spend your money, spend your money. I would say that this is a good movie for me because it actually just like it works for me. Like when I watched this trailer, right after the trailer, I was like, I gotta see this film. For a lot of artists, like people, for people that love like comic books and stuff like that, really this would probably be for you. Really, this is a movie that there is a guy that is called Jeff, who Jeff is to kind of continue to live off the success of his previous comic book called The Grizzly Kin. And so Jeff is just kind of like living off that one like success, and but his wife is now like, well, yeah, but like what are you doing now? Like what is your new project? And Jeff is like, so eventually we start to see that Jeff's Grizzly Kin has this kind of like Nightmare Before Christmas kind of style to it, where they're kind of very like dark-ish like characters, but like, and eventually it seems like the ghosts that are to appear in this film are also kind of having that kind of same kind of style as well. Like they kind of have this like Nightmare Before Christmas kind of like approach to them. Or if anybody has seen the movie, the original Krampus film, like it kind of also has that kind of style to a lot of these things. So, so going into this film, what exactly is this movie about? So teeing it up, so this movie is about a comic book artist who is eventually living off of one success, and his wife is just getting fairly just tired of it, to the point of it seeming that eventually Maggie is to just want a divorce from Jeff, because she's just like, when are you going to get a real job? When are you going to do the next project? It just seems like you consistently say that you're working, but working on what? So, but really it's just that Jeff has been spending way too much time with Samantha and really not doing much else at all. So, Maggie is to eventually just divorce Jeff and want custody of their child. And then all of a sudden, we have Maggie who is hit by a car. And then all of a sudden, like, Jeff is to try, or is to retain custody of said child. But then it seems that all of a sudden, like, more and more within this house, there seems to be some kind of like post-traumatic stress going on in this home, where eventually it seems like the spirit of Maggie is appearing because it seems like there is some unfinished business. And then it also seems that Jeff is kind of taking all the stuff that is kind of happening in his home, and all of a sudden he is churning it into a new comic book that people seem to really enjoy. Uh, but eventually Jeff is starting to realize that there's something going on in his home, and he has to try to figure out what it is, try to think that it might be the spirit of his wife, and that Jeff has to try to convince her to move on. And but yeah, so really, Jeff is to eventually, after his wife is to pass away, he's to realize that I need to get back on my feet. I need to get a new job, and so he starts going and having to forcibly just be like relegated to just doing some inks for comic books. But then eventually it seems that somebody needs him for a story, and so he just bizarrely has the right pitch at the right time, and where they just decide, ooh, like, okay, like we want this as next story. And so Jeff is like, okay, all right, like I guess I'll just keep like sketching stuff out for you guys, and like we'll keep just building this story. But while Jeff is building this story, there's a lot of problems that happen at home. And eventually, like, we get to much more problems further down the road. But yeah, like, this story also eventually, not only it being a ghost story, it also becomes like a whodunit kind of film, where eventually it seems that Rivers, who is Maggie's father, is to say, like, yeah, like, if anything, I want to figure out who is the person who ran over my daughter, and so I want to figure out who that is. And and so there's kind of like a whodunit kind of story in here too. And here's the thing, like, I had this kind of confusion of whether or not, like, because Jeff is an artist in this movie, I'm kind of wondering if maybe Jeff's post-traumatic thing going on here, combined with his daughter's post-traumatic stress kind of thing, is generating out of Jeff's like pouring of ideas for a new comic book, news story, whatever, is eventually just turning every single ghost into like what Jeff would draw, what Jeff would put together, and so on and so forth in one of his books. And so, like, I think that might be an interesting thing to just kind of eventually, because eventually towards the end of this film we see that Jeff like basically copies and pastes what is going on through all these ghosts and makes a comic book out of it. And then it's like, okay, well, so was Jeff, like, was this Jeff's mind at work, or was this just being like a thing that just so happened, and like Jeff just like pounced on it kind of thing? There is this kind of back and forth with me trying to figure out where exactly this is all happening and how it all intertwines together, and so on and so forth. Like, I feel like there has to be like some kind of connection between Jeff's brain, or maybe the brain of his daughter, because it seems like their brains are so similar. I want to try to make that connection, but it is kind of hard. It also kind of feels like to me that like Kevin Bacon, like Stir of Echoes movie, where eventually Kevin Bacon has this one like event, like this one time where he was hypnotized, where all of a sudden he just is starting to all of a sudden see things and like hear stuff, and but it seemed like Kevin Bacon's son could do that like all the time already. And so like maybe these two people were already seeing these ghost things, but like it really didn't come full surface until just now, to where it's like, oh, okay, so like maybe Jeff was just kind of seeing this in his imagination, but eventually with this traumatic event, like all these things started to really pull to the forefront because of this traumatic event. So uh, I enjoy this movie, but it might not be a good selling point for everybody. And some people might like there might be this kind of mixed reaction for this film, um, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed this film. So let's get into the spoilers of this movie because yeah, I've kind of held off long enough. But let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we do spoil this movie. I'm gonna reset for a second, so let me just reset. All right. So the very beginning of this movie, we are to have Jeff and Samantha who are up in the attic because Jeff does all of his uh, or not up in the attic. Uh, Jeff and Samantha are in Jeff's artist room, kind of looking at some old sketches. And Samantha's like, "Man, I could never actually like come up with something, like come up with a world of something like that's never in my kind of like way of drawing or approaching or whatever." But it seems that Jeff, you can easily come up with any number of things. So it seems like Samantha is kind of buttering Jeff up like consistently. So Jeff is to have his daughter that like consistently goes up in the attic consistently. And so Jenny is to go and play like tea party with a lot of her toys and stuff like that. A lot of the toys that are to have been given to her by her father. Excuse me. Because it seems like he is one a puppet maker, but it also seems that he had taken a lot of stuff that he had made from his grizzly kin and like had like stuff made from it. So Jenny is to see a bird that is to appear at this window, and Jenny is to like go nearby it. I think a lot of times in this trailer, like I think this trailer is trying to make this movie a lot scarier than it actually is because like there's a lot of times we can see in the trailer and you're just like, oh man, this is probably gonna be a really scary film. Like, is it gonna be like an Insidious kind of film? Like, is it gonna be kind of like that where I'm just like, whoa, whoa, whoa? Where I didn't get really all that scared in Insidious either, but I think that's where they were trying to like almost copy and paste from in this movie, kind of an Insidious style. So, but it wasn't that scary. But anyways, so Jenny is to go and look at this window for this bird, and eventually this bird is to kind of like bash into the window, and Jenny is to go like flying, and she's holding on to this piece of wood, and then eventually Jenny is to fall. So they hear that loud banging, but Jeff is like consistently like calling for Jenny, like, "Hey Jenny, like, are you like okay?" So eventually they are to go into the attic, and so eventually there is a bruise on Jenny, and so Maggie is wanting to take Jenny to the hospital, and Jeff is like, well, I think that she's just fine. Like, I don't think like she's a kid. She'll get hurt. She'll fall. Whatever. But we really have Maggie that's just like, well, like you know what? Like I have Samantha here and I have you here, but she's still getting hurt. Like so, what do I pay Samantha for? And plus, also Jeff, like what are you working on? Like what are you exactly doing? That's going to be a new project that's going to earn money here. And Jeff is like, well, I'm working on stuff. It's like, well, what exactly? Like, what new thing are you working on? And Jeff is like, yeah, and exactly. So Jeff is to have Maggie go and take Jenny to the hospital, and Jeff is like, well, how about I go? Like I want to see like what's wrong with our daughter because I do care. And Maggie's like, you know what? I'm just kind of just done. Like I'm just kind of like it's getting to the point now where like even with two people watching over my daughter, she's still going to get hurt. She's still going to get injured. I think I'm just done with like kind of just uh like having to be like the breadwinner and like seeing that Jeff is supposedly doing nothing exactly productive for this family. So Maggie is to file a divorce on Jeff because reasonably it's just irreconcilable differences. Because eventually they go to this hearing, and Maggie and Maggie and her father is to talk about like the projects that supposedly Jeff had where like he's just been living off of a success of a comic book that has been like finished, has been done. And Jeff is like, well, like, yeah, but I was also, because this is like a custody battle hearing. And Jeff was like, well, like, yeah, but I was also working on a TV show for the Grizzly Kin. And Maggie was like, yeah, but that didn't work out now, did it? And so Jeff is like, well, yeah, because like I found out through the people that like they were trying to do these characters in the incorrect way that I didn't want. So like there was just a whole like difference of opinion of where I wanted these characters to go and where they wanted these characters to go, so it just went nowhere. So Rivers and like Maggie are just saying to Jeff, it's like, well, yeah, that's where like that's where you're going. You're heading nowhere. And so Maggie is wanting to have full custody, and Jeff is like, well, wait a minute, like I should get some kind of visitation. And Maggie's like, no, like here's a big fat check. How about you go away, kind of thing. And Jeff is like, no, like I want to at least see my daughter. Like I feel like I have the right to. And Maggie's like you don't even make money. Like you don't have a real, true, legitimate job. Because that's what happens with a lot of people that end up being like an artist or whatever. Like people just are like, wow, like you don't have a legitimate job that gives you a legitimate paycheck. So like you're nothing. You're just a person that is just like taking up space kind of thing, and that's always kind of sad where it's just like, well, yeah, but like just wait till something happens, just wait till like uh I can do this much grander, bigger thing, and then like, well, hey, like look at me now kind of thing. But anyways, so through this custody battle, Jeff is to eventually bump into one of his old friends from high school, which is to be Connor. And so Jeff is bumping into Connor while Jenny and him are going to a place, I guess, for uh, like food or something like that. And so Connor is to mention like, hey man, like I did this after high school, and like I sold this certain kind of comic book to some kind of company and they bought it, and I'm a huge success now. And Jeff is like, oh great man, like that's great. And Connor is immediately asking Jeff, it's like, well, hey, what are you doing now? And Jeff is like, well, not much, man. Like I'm just kind of just like I'm just kind of just like trying to get my career back together, or get my career um, jump started again. And so Connor is like, well, hey man, like maybe we'll work on something together. Maybe I can like uh, offer you a job to like see if you want to work on something. And Jeff is like, well, hey, like you want to reboot like the Grizzly Kin? And Connor's like, no, man, like that was such a long time ago, and like like I would much rather like have you do like inking or like try to like do something different or something new, or like just try to like start like kind of uh like penciling over people basically. So like Jeff is just kind of like, oh, and like Connor is like, oh, okay, well, it seems like you need some time marinating on this, but like the door is still open. And so Jeff is like, yeah, okay, because like Jeff, I guess naturally assumed that he would just be going in there, and like everybody would be like, heck yeah, like do whatever you want, uh, and we'll back you kind of thing. Where like Jeff is just kind of like, yeah, like I kind of living off previous successes still, but eventually once he starts working in this comic book and like juices start to flow, then eventually he comes up with something new, something fresh. So, because he forcibly has to. So, Jeff and Maggie are consistently on the phone, like just talking to one another, and Maggie is still like consistently at Jeff for just like because Jeff accidentally told Maggie the wrong address of where they were actually at eating, and so Maggie has to talk to Jenny to confirm, like, hey, Daddy gave me the wrong address. And so we start to see consistently that Maggie is starting to, like, consistently walk through these streets. And before even seeing the trailer or whatever, if you could just watch this movie, you can kind of tell, like, where this spot is heading. Like where this spot is going. And plus, I also kind of ruined it by even talking about it cryptically. But really, you can kind of tell that Maggie isn't exactly paying attention to anything on the road. It seems like she's just kind of walking. And I don't even know if like she even hit any like pedestrian like things to actually cross. I think she's just crossing streets because there's no traffic there. So Maggie is to keep going through the streets berating Jeff while she is doing it, and then eventually she is to get hit by a car. So we have basically like not actually a funeral at grave service in this movie. We just have a bunch of people at Jeff's house that are all just mourning the loss of Maggie. And it seems that Jeff had put up some portrait that it seemed that he thought that Maggie actually liked. And Rivers comes in, who is Maggie's father, who is just like, no, like Maggie never liked that portrait. If anything, uh, like no one really liked that portrait. And like Jeff is like, well, maybe Jenny was the one that liked the portrait. I don't know. Like it's the only portrait that we have, so I just put it up. So Jenny is to all of a sudden start taking this ketchup and like start like bizarrely just painting with ketchup all over this wall, and Jeff is trying to control his daughter, but all of a sudden his daughter is like talking in almost baby like talk. Consistently Jenny is referring to herself as baby, and like it's kind of like she's like reverting back to infancy. And so Jeff is trying to control his daughter, and eventually his daughter just runs off and he's like, I hate you. I wish mom was here instead of you. And so Jenny runs off, and so Samantha is basically telling Jeff to just pull out some damage control to go to the people in the room and just like start talking about things and just kind of try to smooth things over, but Jeff doesn't know how to smooth things over. So Jeff just goes in the room and is mentioning like, well, you know, I would probably have had a like speech to like say that I probably would have written down somewhere, but Maggie is usually the person that is to have reminded me of that. So so like Jeff tries to come up and like wing some kind of speech, like mentioning how like if anything like Maggie's like best thing about her was her love for her daughter, and like so like how she was always like a really good mom, and so on and so forth. I'm like, like this isn't like heading into like he could have came up with like some like past story of a good time between Maggie and Jeff and Jenny. Like he could have had some kind of like interesting story, but instead he just kind of like was just trying to like so like because I think really Jeff didn't want to go in there to do damage control. I think Jeff just wanted to just like I'm just gonna just sit. I'm just gonna stand around and hope no one notices kind of thing, and then they'll eventually just leave whenever they want to. But so after this whole service, I guess there's accidentally while Jeff is talking, all of a sudden the portrait is started to light on fire and burn, and so someone is to put it out while Jeff is talking because I guess evidently nobody realized the portrait was burning. So, but so after this, we have Rivers who is to want custody of Jenny because Rivers is like, well, I can take care of her much better than you probably can, and it seems like you still don't have a real job. And this is even after Jeff is to go and desperately go out to Connor and say, hey man, like, I'll take whatever job that you have. Like, if it's inking, I'll ink. If it's like coming up with somebody, something with somebody, I'll do that too. But like, just give me some kind of job. And Connor's like, yes, like I'll definitely like I'll get you something. And so Jeff is like, great, because like he just needs to just prove to people that he can work again, and so that's technically what he's doing. So, but it seems consistent that Rivers is to want custody, even so much so that Rivers is kind of like coming to the house consistently, like kind of checking up on Jeff and all kinds of things, kind of getting in the way. But anyways, so eventually Jeff is to fall asleep one day, and Jeff is to open the door of the attic. All of a sudden, there is to be some clownish like person with this like it looks like prison get up. It looks like black and white stripes, but I could be wrong about the color of whatever. But like this character is to all of a sudden come from out of this attic and start like performing this body contortion like act where he is to basically uh take his entire body and twist and turn it and like have himself on all fours but backwards to where his like hands are kind of like held and his like back is held, and so this character consistently keeps like moving its joints and all kinds of bizarre like acts and coming closer and closer and closer to Jeff to eventually he is to be cornered into this part of this room, and the ghost Esh like thing is to almost get on top of Jeff, and then Jeff is to wake up. So, like, I thought that that was kind of rather bizarre. Like, I didn't quite understand exactly what any of that meant. But it seems that this is going to just continue popping off like ghosts that are to appear. So, Jeff is also, like, I guess he had to mention before that there had been some times where he doesn't even remember like drawing some stuff that he had drawn, because it seems like there were sometimes maybe when he was high or maybe when he was just not really like 100% like thinking clearly, like all of a sudden he would just be drawing stuff without him realizing it. So eventually Jeff is to start scribbling these drawings that look just like this, while he is to have been working on some ink art for certain kind of artists. So Jeff is to start drawing like things like this. And so coincidentally, there is a guy named Alan who is to need an artist and need them fairly quickly that is going to come up with some sketches for this guy's horror book, because this guy like goes into um, this company when Jeff is to try to desperately ask for a job, and Alan is to start talking to Connor about like these monsters and these chupacabras and all these kind of like bizarre things that a lot of people might be familiar with, like the Supernatural show does stuff like that, where like it's chupacabras and like it's outer space and it's all kind of weird, bizarre like things that this guy is kind of throwing in there, because this guy has these like senses of like uh like he's very like Zen masterish, where he's just like, you know what, I think you have some kind of dark energy to you. and and Collins is telling Jeff, it's like, well, yeah, like he did just lose his like wife, like his wife just got hit by a car recently. And so Alan is like, well, like maybe he might be good enough to be our new artist. And so Jeff goes and starts putting in the sketches of all the stuff that they got, or all the stuff that they wanted for really Jeff to ink. Like, I honestly think that probably the approach of the way that they're doing comic books for this company may actually be fairly old fashioned, because I think a lot of comic book artists does all kinds of stuff just off of computer. Like if you go onto probably like Todd McFarlane, I don't know if he has a YouTube channel or a Facebook or whatever, but like I consistently see him doing sketches of like Spawn or Spider-Man or whichever, and he's doing this all off of like a computer or a laptop or whatever, a tablet or something. And so he's like drawing like a bunch of like sketches and stuff like that. And so really that's kind of the more modern approach to what comic books are doing. This kind of feels like a painted or an old fashioned kind of style, which I think there's still comic books that still approach that in that kind of style and that kind of way. But I think a majority of most try to do like the digital way, just because, especially now, uh, everything is to be probably easier sold as a digital book, much more so than an actual like hardcover, or like a actual copy, whatever. Anyways, moving on. So Alan is to just go. Alan and Connor are coincidentally in the office to try to find an artist, and Jeff comes in with his inks, and so they all of a sudden start looking at all the product that Jeff had finished, and all of a sudden they are to see a sketch like this, and they are to be like, whoa, like this looks interesting, even though it looks like mad scribbles. And Alan is like, yeah, like this guy has a dark like soul to him, like there's something about him that has this like dark kind of like approach to it, like that's what I'm looking for in my new book. And Jeff is like, whoa, 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 like I'm just an inker. But Alan's like, no, like you have potential. There's something here. Like I want to see more sketches. I want to see more of what you have that can be brought to this table for this kind of story. And so both Jeff and Alan are working together to put this book out. And really, it just gets to the point where Jeff is kind of spewing out into this book, like everything that is pretty much just going on in his home. It seems like they're playing out what's going on in his home in this comic book, to where it seems like a lot of the images seems to echo what is going on in his own home. So so eventually we start to keep seeing this uh, ghost that is to, I guess, represent Maggie, but is to have this kind of very much uh, like clay, like clown looking Esh like face, and this kind of very much like kind of darkened like approach to it, kind of how this kind of looks, but with a clown looking kind of face that is to quasi be terrifying. So Maggie is to consistently appear to Jenny while Jenny is sleeping. And so at first, like Jeff is just thinking that this thing is probably just Jenny's imagination. And so Maggie is like afraid of this at first, so Jeff goes and follows her into a room and just kind of looks under her bed, looks into her closet. He's like, "Well, I don't see anything." But then eventually the more and more like Jeff is starting to get uneasy even in his own home, to where Jeff is like, "Well, hey, how about I put a camera in your bed? Or how about I put a camera in your room? Just so that way I can make sure that you're much more safe, because maybe like to kind of keep you at ease and keep me at ease." And so plus also Jeff is like kind of using these puppets to make his daughter much more happier. It seems that both Jeff and Jenny are finally having fun, and they're finally running around the house, and like Jeff is using his imagination uh, to kind of have Jenny have more fun, because there's a lot of times where uh, Jeff is to like fail at being a father, like being able to simply be able to cook things. And he's like, "Well, God, like I'm sucking at this. So, well, you know what? The one good thing that I can do, I can order out, and then like we'll have food, and like that'll be okay." So Samantha is to keep continually coming into the house, and Samantha, who is their babysitter, and like Samantha is kind of consistently getting close to Jeff. Samantha is even at one point going and like kissing Jeff, and then she's like, "Whoa, like this might have been a mistake." But it seems like more and more Samantha is kind of playing up to the fact of like, well, like, hey, like if you guys want to move, or if you guys want to go somewhere else, like, hey, like I can just pick up and leave, like I have no problems with that. And like Samantha is just kind of like, well, hey, like she's kind of like playing up the fact that like Samantha is consistently like, well, it seems like uh Jeff and her are kind of like-minded people. And there's sometimes where it seems that Samantha does want to grab some alone time with Jeff, and Jeff is like, "You know what? I don't think I have the time for that." Whereas Samantha's like, "Well, hey, do you want to like get high and watch cartoons?" And Jeff is like, "Nah, I don't think I have time for that right now." And so Samantha is to eventually like consistently babysit Jeff when Jeff has like something to mow over about giving his child over to Rivers or not, and that leads to Jeff getting a job at the comic book place. And so Jeff is to, and I know I'm like this review is kind of all over the place, but like there's certain stories that I guess I need to get into, and there's certain kind of places that I need to be at in this film, and that causes this to be almost all over the place. But check out the movie if you haven't. So Samantha is to start to be with Jeff when Jenny is to go out to this like park with them, and she is to play with this like Alice in Wonderland like statue, and then eventually go and see this puppet show. And all of a sudden Jeff is all of a sudden starting to see these images of like this whole red background, and people are all laughing at him, and like the puppet show is laughing at him. And eventually, while Jeff is to make his way home from work off of this subway, it seems that Jeff is to eventually find this dark um, thing that could possibly look like the thing that he drew here eventually on this subway. And so eventually Jeff is to touch upon it, and then eventually it is to vanish. and Jeff is back in normal like subway. So there is this one spot where Jeff is to uh, eventually kind of check on his daughter because Jeff is to see a spirit in the camera that is to, I guess, have been Maggie. And so Jeff goes to Maggie's or Jenny's room, and there seems to be something with a sheet over its head. And so Jeff is to pull the sheet to eventually find it's just Jenny. And then it's like, okay, well, I wish there would have been a much more in your face kind of scare of this. Like it kind of gets to where this movie is unsettling, but it doesn't full on like blah, something at you, which I'm kind of is like I'm like, this kind of feels like a tease kind of movie. You need to be like in my face about something. Like, give me something where it's like in my face. It's like, "Blah!" And then I'm like, whoa, like, holy crap. Like, this movie never gets there. It just teases a lot, which may work in other people's favor or may not. So Rivers is to eventually find out who the culprit is of the person who had ran uh, Maggie over, and Jeff is kind of convinced that maybe like Maggie or that Jenny needs to get out of the house, and maybe Rivers might be a good like spot for every once in a while for like Jenny to just be taken by Rivers and just kind of spend the day with him. And because eventually Jeff is to talk to Alan and mention like, hey man, like I think I'm seeing ghosts. Maybe my daughter is too. Like where like what should I do about that kind of thing? Like in a roundabout way, like Jeff doesn't exactly say that, but it seems more and more that eventually like in a roundabout way he kind of gets that route with Alan to just kind of like understand some things about ghosts. And then eventually Alan is to give Jeff this kind of like peyote like drug so he can take and try to like talk with Maggie and try to get her to move on because evidently she can't. So we push on here and so Jeff is to try and take this peyote like drug while Rivers and Jenny are like away. And so because also there is a moment uh where Jenny is to get uh a peanut in her food and she is to have a anaphylactic shock. Like Jeff thinks that Jenny is choking at first, but then he's like, "Oh no, like she has like an allergic reaction." So like I got to find my EpiPen for her cuz Samantha is kind of like, "I don't know where it is. I don't know where it is." Uh and so Jeff says like it's in my bag, like get it from there. And so Jeff goes and does the EpiPen on Jenny, and then Jenny is fine. And so Rivers is to show up, and so Jeff is going and like kind of talking to the police, and it seems like all of a sudden there are bruises on Jenny, and Jeff is like, "Well, I was giving her the Heimlich maneuver, like I thought she was choking at first, but then I realized like she was having an allergic reaction. She was choking, like her face was turning blue." So eventually like the police are to separate the kid from the dad, and they're like almost accusing him of abuse, and it's like, no, 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 like all I did was like I was trying to give her the Heimlich because I thought she was choking. Also while Jeff was giving his daughter an EpiPen, uh Samantha was kind of right by the kitchen or the dining room place where there is chandelier. All of a sudden, the chandelier is to start to unscrew and unravel, and then Samantha is to get hit in the back of the head with this chandelier and knock her out. The doctors look over at her or look over her, and it seems like she's fine. And so Samantha just is lying in this bed, uh, to like just kind of like recover from her getting smacked in the head. And Samantha's saying, you know what, I think I'm fine. If anything, like there's no real problems here. I just got hit by a chandelier. It was weird. So Samantha is to go and sleep in this bed as the medic is to leave. And so all of a sudden we have Maggie's ghost that is appearing by Samantha's bed and choking her out. To where Samantha is now running to Jeff after she's to get released by the spirit. And Samantha is to mention to Jeff, like, you know that like ghost thing that I mentioned before? Because Samantha had saw a ghost like up in the attic while Jen was also in the attic. So Samantha was trying to get Jen out of the attic again because she kept going in there to the point of Jeff needing to put a lock on this attic because Jenny just kept going in there. And so like Jeff didn't want Jenny to get hurt, so he just kind of like just put a lock on that thing, but that didn't stop her anyways from getting up there. So Samantha had told Jeff about this situation, that it just seemed really weird. Everything about both Jenny and this ghost thing just seemed weird to her, but she didn't exactly go full-fledgedly on about everything that she saw. And so now, like, Samantha is mentioning, like, you know that thing that I thought was weird? I'm seeing it again. And so Jeff is like, you know what? I think we all just need to get out of this house. But I also just need to like spiritually like uh peyote whatever my wife away because she just like won't let things go. So eventually Jeff is to do his peyote trip and try to talk to his wife and get her to go away. And so eventually we have Rivers, Samantha, and Jenny coming back into the home because Rivers is like, well, hey, like we're gonna go back and to see Jeff and like see how things are, and Jeff is out. Like I think Jeff is going and doing something comic book related where they are to do like the final like sell of Jeff's comic book, and Jeff has already made the consensus that he's going to like commute this work for Connors because really he wants to just completely move and move closer actually to Rivers so that way Rivers can see Jenny a lot more. And like when both Rivers and Jeff were doing this like whole custody hearing, like Jeff was just like, hey, like I think it's much better if I let Rivers being able to see his granddaughter, and so I'm going to personally move to get closer to him so he can actually see his granddaughter. And so like Rivers is like, you know what, that's good enough for me, like that's great, like so like I'm willing to do that. Like it's good that like this guy is kind of like really like wanted to meet me halfway kind of thing. And like Jeff is really doing some growing up here. So it seems like Jeff and Rivers had come to the consensus of that, where it's like Jeff still wants to be with his kid, but also he's like, I also want like Rivers to see like his granddaughter. So like that was a really great moment. And so Jeff is like, is, and Jeff and Rivers are talking after this, and Rivers is like, hey, like I finally, like I think I'm coming to like the conclusion of who that person ran over Maggie. And Jeff is like, yeah, let me know, like definitely let me know who that was, like any information that you get, let me know. And so So Rivers and Jenny are going upstairs with Samantha, and because Jenny is kind of playing in her room, so Rivers is gonna go in there to just kind of play with her and whatever, and like Samantha is just kind of going up there too. So so Jeff is going off to like tell his boss what he's doing, that he's gonna communicate, or that he's gonna like communicate or like shift his work from off where he is. So Connors is like, hey man, like I get it, like I have all these offices, but you know everybody wants to just like stay at home and just do everything in their shorts. So like that's perfectly fine. So it seems like they're sealing the deal on this one-off book, but really, Connor is to mention, you know what? I don't like the ending of this book. Like, I really think that we should just do a two-parter, and like we should have the ghost come back for one last scare. And Jeff is like, oh my god, maybe that's what's gonna happen in my life. That I thought like I clean slated everything and that I worked everything out, but maybe Maggie's coming back for one last scare. And so Jeff after talking to Connor, he's just kind of like, you know what? Like I think I need to go home. Like I think I just thought of something, and like I thought I left the pot on or something. So Jeff scrambles to get back home, and all of a sudden we have Rivers who is falling down the stairs. I'm like, say what? So Jeff is to now like run home to find Rivers like on these steps, and so like Jeff is kind of like checking Rivers' pulse to see if he's dead or not. And so like Rivers, it seems like he's just kind of barely holding on, and so Rivers is giving Jeff like his phone to say like, hey, I found out who it was, like here's the photo, like here you go. And Jeff is now like going and like, okay, like I'm unlocking this, like okay, like Rivers, like hang in there, like because Jeff is also calling the police and trying to like get like help for Rivers. So, but also Jeff is like, I gotta figure out who this is. So like he's like going, like, I gotta figure out who this is. I gotta figure it out. Who's this? So all of a sudden Samantha starts walking down the stairs, and Samantha's like, hey, what's going on? And Jeff is like, oh my god, like I figured out who ran over my wife. And so Jeff is to show the photo to Samantha, say, here, look who it is, it's you, Samantha. Samantha had ran over Maggie. And I'm like, oh my god, like this is actually a whodunit movie, and I was maybe thinking that it might have been Jeff the entire time or some weird goofy thing, but it was Samantha. Like it wasn't even her own father, which I thought that would have been weird because why is Rivers wanting this kid so desperately? But no, it was Samantha. Like Samantha, like bizarrely, she kept pressing Jeff to try to get a relationship, and it just wasn't working. And Samantha was like, well, like we just seem like so like connected, and it just seems like we would have been perfect for one another, and it just seems like Maggie was in the way of that, and I just had to get her out of the way of that. And plus also like she was never really good for you kind of thing. So we just start to see like Samantha just unwinding and just turning into this bat crap crazy person, and like right in front of us, to just be like, well, I thought we were good for one another. So all of a sudden, like Samantha is unraveling all the reasons why, like she thought that this could work. Because also here's the thing: Samantha had given Jenny like I guess probably peanut oil in her food to kill Jenny off. So like both Samantha and Jeff could be together. So not only was Samantha killing off Maggie, but she was also trying to kill off Jenny in the same same way. So I'm like, wow, what a reveal. Plus, I guess also Samantha also killed Rivers, so she's like multiple killing people. So Samantha is to eventually break this one glass, and eventually she is to take a piece of this glass and just kind of like hold it up to her. And all of a sudden, the ghost of Maggie is to appear, and Jeff is like, "Well, goodbye, Samantha, because guess who's gonna kill you?" And so Maggie is to appear in ghost form and to kill Samantha by, of course, slicing her throat. So Samantha is to die, and all of a sudden we have Jenny who is on the rooftop because it seems that Jenny is now like by this window, and she was to talk to Maggie, and Jenny was to lose one of her shoes while talking to Maggie on this thing because it seems like Maggie was desperate to want to have Jenny come with her in the afterlife, but Jenny wasn't ready yet. So so Jenny is now back on the attic, and so Jeff and Maggie are there, like uh, seeing their daughter, and it seems that both Jeff and the spirit of Maggie are having this kind of like debate about like, hey, don't hurt my daughter. Like I'm like I like let's keep her safe. Whatever, don't go after her. And so eventually, Jeff is going out of his way to or going to his way to get to Jenny so that way she comes off this ledge kind of thing. And all of a sudden, like Jenny is starting to slip, and then Jeff is like going after her, and like they're hugging one another, and I guess they are to assume that maybe one another could break one another's fall. And so what ends up happening is that Maggie ends up saving them both, and so neither one of them are to actually die. And so all of a sudden, like the spirit of Maggie is to like vanish off, and we are to naturally assume that all of that has just concluded of just like, well, like she didn't want to hurt Jeff and she didn't want to hurt her daughter, but like she just wanted to, I guess, try to figure out how some way or another she could say goodbye and also like protect this family. And I guess like the one thing that Maggie had to protect them from was Samantha. And then eventually once Samantha is done, like Maggie is still trying to hold close to her family, and like but she didn't know the exact right way to say goodbye. So yeah, like all of this stuff is to happen. All these dead bodies are in this guy's home, and so like the police is called for all of this, and everything is squared away that like Samantha was the killer, and like Jeff gets out of this basically like scot free. Like there isn't any prison sentence for Jeff for any of these murders because really they can just say that Samantha did all of this and then just killed herself after the point. So Jeff and Jenny are to, I guess, still move out and move away and get a fresh start. So, really, I guess that's the real true ending with this movie of just seeing like Maggie kind of bizarrely, like visually float off. Like the one cool moment that I saw here is when Jeff was going through his peyote moment, and all of a sudden, like his like radio was kind of like sticking with him, like it was kind of like being like a painting that was being shifted or moved or blurred or whatever, and like you could start to see a lot of the furniture that all of a sudden was starting to like melt or like shift or whatever, and that looked like really cool imagery for these moments. But a lot of this has a lot to do with visuals, and I think that's the thing that won me over with this movie. I apologize that this review might have been all over the place and somebody might have get confused. There's probably a lot of stuff going on in this movie. A lot of moments could be jumbled and whatever, and not like said exactly how this movie goes verbatim. But I think I did cover most of this movie because this movie kind of is an all over the place kind of film. And but I actually enjoy this film, and I hope you enjoyed it too, or you enjoyed this review, or something. So I think with that said, I think I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.